I'm Ryan. Hello, everyone. Hello. Nice to see you all. Are you ready for the heat tomorrow? No. Either, but I'm just going to be.
Have mercy upon our souls.
Exactly. I'm just going to hide inside with the AC on.
Right.
So let's see here. How do I get back to this? All right. So I'll give you the real brief thing. I'm going to show you something. I've been storyboarding, writing, directing, producing animation for something scary like 30 years. I've worked with Sesame Workshop, Disney, Nickelodeon, Titmouse, I don't know, a million small things in between all that. I guess like drawing, I started, you guys, I guess was drawing all the time. I actually went to school, got my degree in illustration, kind of before animation was a degree you could get in. I went to Ringling before Ringling was what you know Ringling to be today. I'm going to show you, I also do books. I've done like 10 or 12 children's books. I've done books, animation, I write, all that. Here is my short demo reel. This has, let's see if I can work this thing. Is it up there? Oh, yeah, okay. I'll tell you about that. This is, oh, there you go. This is something I did for Sesame Street. It's 3D mocap with 3D mocap puppets. This is another mocap puppet I did with a big advertising agency. You can see what it is. This is Plate and Cup. This is the one I sold to Sesame Street. We did a short pilot for it. It's on YouTube. It's about arts education. I do a lot of Cookie Monster stuff. This is YouTube Cookie Monster where he has to chase the cookie all the time. I kind of help write these because it's just all slapstick. This is a Nickelodeon show. It's a song, Hispanic show, singing songs. More Cookie Monster. He's always got to get the cookie, and then he always there's conundrums all over the place. Gets Big Bird to help. I also worked in apps. Pokio. I've worked with Pokio. We did like math apps we licensed Pokio. I was working with the voice talent over in Spain, in Brooklyn. I've done a lot of math education. You see, I do most of preschool education stuff. I worked on robots. Yeah. Robots was super fun. I got robot stories. There you go. Tots. More back to this. That's 30 years in a minute. There you go. Sorry, Matt. No, you don't have to demo.
Hey guys, thanks you all for coming out. Thanks to ASIFA, Ginger, Drew. This is awesome. My name's Matt Burns. I do not have a reel because I'm a producer. I've got a resume though we can talk through. But yeah, the quick rundown on me. I've been working at Titmouse for the last like 5 years as a line producer. Right now I'm on a Disney show called KIF. Maybe some of you, anybody? Yeah. All right, cool. Before that, an Apple TV show called Duck and Goose that Ryan storyboarded on, so that's how we know each other. I've been in animation, kids TV for about 10 years. I worked at Nickelodeon for a little while. I worked at Cartoon Network, a smaller animation studio in Brooklyn for a little while on some Adult Swim stuff. And yeah, I recently moved back home. I grew up in Alpharetta, which maybe some of you did. Yeah? The Alpharetta High School graduate? Yeah? I appreciate the support though. But yeah, it's cool to be back. I moved back to Georgia. I live in Roswell now. And yeah, I'm still working with Titmouse.
Cool. Thank you guys. So let's go ahead and get into the Q&A. So we'll start with you, Matt. Could you explain a bit of the production hierarchy and where you fall in there?
Yeah. Also, for who in here is like interested in like production stuff versus art? Like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Like, not that many, so bear with me, everybody else, but hopefully it's somewhat interesting.
I will say, from the art, it is important to know the hierarchy because you got to know who to contact. Right.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, I'm a line producer. So basically, above me, there's the head of production, head of the studio who runs. I work out of Titmouse, New York. And then essentially she manages multiple shows, everything that's coming in through the studio. I focus on one project at a time, and then I'm managing the whole production team on that show. So basically, working alongside me, I've got a production manager, coordinators, and PAs. And then, so throughout that whole team, and there's some people in LA, some people in New York, we're like all over the place. It's kind of split up throughout the team of PAs who focus on designs, or focus on storyboards, who focus on voice records, and then coordinators and managers who kind of work with the overseas studio and get stuff ready for shipping and retakes and all that. So everything's kind of like divvied up among the team. And yeah, my job as line producer is basically to manage the overall schedule and budget, make sure everything's done on time and under budget, and then just deal with every production disaster that happens pretty much every day.
What are some examples of disasters?
Think of, well, maybe a mild disaster. Managing the whole crew. So say summer's coming up, artists are taking time off, going on vacation. We've got a heavy episode that's coming up that's got a ton of backgrounds. It's like figuring out, do we need to hire freelancers? Do we need to bring in extra people for these 2 weeks to help out because this artist is going to be out? That's like a good disaster. That's like a standard problem.
It's an oxymoron.
Yeah, and then a bigger, anything that could come up from something that happened on Duck and Goose. Apple asked us to, change something in the credits that Apple decided to change 6 months after the entire show had been delivered and released. So there was a problem to solve. So my job is to figure out how to solve those problems when they come up.
Very cool.
Nice.
Good work. Cool. All right. What's yours? So, Ryan,
Yes.
do you find overlap in skill sets for making storyboards and illustrating children's books?
Yes, that would be the simple answer. But it is different because I'd say mostly with animation, they really want you to stay on model with whatever that is. That took me a while to get used to being able to draw exactly more or less what anything looks like so you could recognize it. When I was actually on robots, I was no good at that. And that was where I had a real butt kicking on how to learn to draw on model. But yeah, obviously it's kind of the same. Books is like so much slower than animation. Books, it's more like you're waiting a month to get notes back. Whereas animation, it's like, hey, here's the notes. I need that like yesterday. So it's like the speed is radically different. I would say for anyone that's like animation, storyboard, anything in art design, it's a speed game. Would you agree, Max? Yeah, it's a speed game. I mean, I think on Duck and Goose, that's our example, I was storyboarding 11 minutes in 2 weeks, and then I would revisions in a week. First pass, so it was loose, but it was quick. So I think mainly it's just, you gotta love drawing, and I think for whether your background, anything, this sounds tough, but like, you gotta really love it because someone else loves it more. I know people that love storyboarding more than me, right? And so that's how you get the job, because you love it, because you're gonna be awake for 12 hours doing it. I mean, I think I was on Duck and Goose, I was really at the desk for 8 to 12 hours a day drawing storyboards. Books, I find a little more relaxed, because you're kind of in your own little groove, and you're kind of by yourself, and you're not answering to anybody besides the editor. So books, it's like, you'll go a week without talking to anybody, like from the production. But with Titmouse or animation shows, every day you're on Slack talking to everybody about, well, I'm missing this design, this background, what do I do here? Whatever. Did I answer the question? Yes, the answer is yes.
Thank you. All right, so let's switch back to Matt, shall we?
We're like taxi.
So, how important are interpersonal skills for your job?
Yeah, extremely important. A lot of my job as line producer is being in between, say, the show creators, like the exec producers, and the network giving notes, as well as the whole crew on the show. So a big thing that often happens is kind of finding delicate ways to give bad news to people, or news that the creators don't want to hear. Like, for instance, it happens on every show. You try to set up the pipeline, the schedule, and the budget for a reasonable amount of art that everyone can do within the schedule. So you set these quotas of, say, there's going to be 20 backgrounds per episode and 30 new characters or whatever. And then inevitably the writers will turn in a script that has 70 backgrounds and a huge crowd shot, and they want all this crazy stuff. So a big part of my job is having to figure out how we can do the most we can do within the parameters of the budget and schedule without burning all the artists out and making people hate working on the show or having to hire a ton of extra people.
Trim the fat, so to speak.
Ideally, yeah, from those scripts to try to like, do we need these 7 montages? Like, could one of them accomplish the same thing without, you know, stomping on these creators, you know, and these writers? You want them to have to be able to see their creative vision all the way through, but there's a schedule and budget, and it's usually pretty tight, and artists are working, like Ryan said, is working crazy hours.
I'll say, I'll jump in. One of the most difficult episodes, to me, the more characters, the longer it takes to board. I had one, normally with the Duck and Goose, it was awesome, it was like Duck and Goose. There's like one other person in there that was like that was the story, whatever, like it's sad, it's happy, whatever it was. One episode you guys had me do, it was like the sad Bluebird one. And they had I had like 4 extra characters in addition to Duck and Goose and the sad characters. And they were like marching around in a parade. It was like, it took me forever to draw it. And then there's so many notes on that all the time. Sorry. But
imagine how much worse it would have been had I not gotten in there.
Yeah.
No, yeah, there was a recent episode of KIF we were working on where a production coordinator who works on preparing the show to ship for animation overseas basically has to go into the storyboard, and it's a big crowd shot. It was like at a stadium, and there were about 40 characters drawn onto these stadium bleachers, and the creators wanted them to be specific characters. And it becomes a production coordinator's job then to go in and figure out who they are and label them. And then the board artists and revisionists need to draw all 40 of those characters on model for the overseas studio. So stuff like that can get brutal. And that's where the interpersonal skills come in, of figuring out ways to kind of mediate this stuff and get in between. There's a lot of people who have very strong opinions about what they want, what somebody else wants, what's possible. And it's just about having like productive, constructive, positive conversations about like what we can do and explaining gently, you know, why we have these limitations and why, you know, say you do those 50 crowd shots, the animation you get back from overseas might not look that great because they had to rush through it. And if you want the finished product to look a little bit better, it helps everyone to just work within the parameters. So, interpersonal skills. Yeah, there's also a lot of just dealing with 50 artists on the show who are doing a lot of work, and everybody's pretty stressed and burnt out. So a big part of my job is also consoling directors, art directors, when they get a million notes back from a network or a creator. Often, weekly, they'll have a meltdown about, you know, we got 10,000 notes about this, and just trying to talk them through it, like, it's gonna be okay, we'll figure this out, we'll make a plan, and being like supportive for everybody doing the creative work on the show.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, so Ryan, do you enjoy when you get to participate in writing on your projects as well?
yes, that's my answer for everything. Actually, I really love driving my own projects. I always tell people storyboarding is kind of like my day job, and then I'm always trying to sell shows or shorts or my own content or books. I'm kind of always developing on the side. Yes, over there.
Oh, I was waiting.
Oh, you're waiting. All right, I was going to answer your question. Whatever your question was, remind me again. I lost it there in that moment.
When you get to
Selling shows.
Oh, when I get to write my own stuff. Yes, it's amazing. You know, sometimes I don't get credited, like on the Cookie Monster stuff, or a lot of stuff I don't get credit for that, but I enjoy doing it, and I use that as a skill set, so when I go pitch to someone else, I actually know how to do it, you know, because no one's gonna offer you a writing job unless you've kind of written. And so being able to say it a little bit or have the experience of what it is to write and deal with notes from whoever, Sesame or Disney or whoever it is, getting feedback, getting used to all that stuff is great. So I love writing. I don't find I'm not totally a writer, that's why I don't kind of dive all into it. I'm finding recently more joy in producing and directing and then helping build a team to make that happen. Because I'm not an animator, I don't have the patience to animate, that's why I don't animate. That's why I got the storyboards. I originally was doing puppets because I like puppets because it was faster. And but now I'm like leading or getting the project going. I find recently, I don't even need to lead it anymore. I like kind of developing, getting it going, and then finding the right people to run it, that do it. And then that's joy for me, letting other people come up with stuff and build on it. I found recently, I just like building on ideas. Whatever it is from there is fine. Whoever executives I got to work with, whatever it is. So, yes. That's my answer for most things. I say the answer to everything is just say yes to everything.
How did you find your into storyboarding?
My into storyboarding was, like all things in my career, a little backwards. The other thing, since some you asked about interpersonal relationships, all of your jobs are going to come from people that you know or have met somewhere or another. And so having relationships with everybody, the best relationship you can have with that person is important. Because to this day, even me, who's done this huge career, I do not get replies when I apply over LinkedIn or something. I don't get it. I have to call Matt himself or all the other producers that I know or people that work in the field that I've worked with and be like, hey, do you know of anything? Or the reverse is I sometimes pitch stuff, but back to your storyboard and how I got started. How did I get, all right. I was working at a commercial company and I was doing JCPenney's commercials, art directing JCPenney's commercials, which is why I quit. But in the process, that I was doing a couple small boards, but they were not animated boards. They were like graphic design boards, which I hated. And then it was just, I was doing that. I had some work, and they were developing a project, so I did a bunch of boards basically for free to have something. And then I came up to New York after I quit that job, and I knew everyone at Blue Sky. I knew the director, I knew the CEO, I knew the art director, I knew the board team, and I was like, I'm gonna get this job at Blue Sky. Like, I just have to show up and I'll get it. Of course, no, I got rejected because I didn't have proper storyboards. This is a long story, but this is the only way it works.
We like this tangent. We're listening.
Yeah, okay, and then the whole time I got connected to indie film called Bowling for Columbine, and then that won an Oscar during the Oscars, and then literally the next day after the Oscar ceremony, I got a call from Fox, who owned Blue Sky, and they go, hey, we saw your name in the credits for Bowling for Columbine. Can you come up like tomorrow? And I was working like a job at a children's museum because I had no money. And I was like, do you want me to resend my portfolio? They're like, no, it's fine. And I was like, okay. So I showed the next day. And then I would say that was awesome and super frightening because I was working with like boarders from Iron Giant, the people from Ren and Stimpy, just everyone. It was crazy. It was crazy. And I'd never done boards like as a professional, like high level thing. So basically every day was like going to school on a hill that was like this. Every day was nerve wracking because it was like, this is back in the day when I'd like pin storyboards to like a corkboard and you drag it across the studio. And then the directors and the producers show up and the executives from Fox show up and they're like, show us something funny. And it's like 8 o'clock in the morning. And you're like, okay. So I went through like a really intense battery of education that way. You guys have it good because you kind of know what storyboarding is now. I didn't totally know what that was at the time. And then that ended, and then I got a job on a PBS show called Mayan Miguel. I did 3 episodes and then I got fired. So that's been my career. That's how I got started. So hold on to yourselves as you get fired, and it's like all over the place. Whatever you can have that seems correct, whether you're developing your own thing, you're doing JCPenney's commercials, whatever. It's just like everyone's going to have their own path. I'll say it's a little bit about who you know in college. Become friends with the people that seem to be hustling. That's what, the way I got the job at the JCPenney's thing was my roommate from college had a friend, and the friend from his high school hired him to work at the commercial house, and then my roommate was like, we need another art director. What are you doing? And I said, nothing. He said, come on down to Texas. And I said, great. So there you go.
Thank you. Matt, you want to tell us how?
Question.
Oh yeah, question.
It's kind of for both of you. I was going to ask, like, what type of tips do you have to help people network better? Like what would you recommend students and people trying to get to the industry, how to network, how to mingle with people?
Well, I'll hand it to you, but we just talked about this upstairs, actually. This sounds like a little bit of a weird suggestion, and don't go too far on this because it'll blow up in your face too. when you meet someone, you want to say something memorable. And it's not like you're being obnoxious, like screw this or screw that. It's more like I love mac and cheese so much. I can think about it all the time. And I have a storyboard about mac and cheese. And then the person's gonna meet like all of you at one party, right? So how is he possibly gonna remember when he goes back to the desk who you are versus who you are? And so something to kind of pop, I don't know what that is, that's your own kind of vibe. I also say, go up and talk to whoever you kind of can, but you can't be obnoxious, right? You can't, you gotta just kind of go up and talk to them like a normal person, because Matt will vouch for this too. In animation, you're not at the moment, but in the past, you're basically gonna be locked in a room with that person for 8 to 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. So part of it is they have to kind of like you. You have to have the skills and they like you. And so I find it's just talking to as many people as you can, talking about what you're interested in, because there's also a lot of the interpersonal stuff, like we're into mac and cheese, or Matt and I like talking about tacos. We went for tacos before we came here, like something like that. And down here, it's like, I don't know what it is the moment in New York pre-COVID. All these places had like Christmas parties or networking events or whatever. It's just like, however you can, sometimes cold emails work, sometimes, it's just like, I realize everyone's hard to bump into and meet. It's like the effort. I would say Drew here is actually a pretty good example. I met his mom somewhere when I moved down to Atlanta. And his mom was like, you should talk to my son. And then I talked to Drew, but it's also just like anything that kind of opens up, and also I would say Drew is actually good at reaching out and following up. If you ever get an email from anybody, just try to follow up and get on the phone, or, I don't know, Matt has more suggestions too.
No, yeah, all that. Go to events like this. I think the best advice, just cast as wide a net as you can, and don't expect like one magic. What happens to me sometimes going to like events like this, sometimes people come up to me afterwards and like really be like, I'm an amazing animator, you've got to hire me at Titmouse. And I'll be like, that's great, I'll check out your stuff. We're not currently hiring any animators. It comes in waves when projects start and end. And then they'll like keep pitching, like, no, but you really gotta check me. I'm like, okay, yeah, like I can't hire you right now. I don't have a job. And like they just keep like, don't do that. I remembered this guy I'm thinking of now. That's
why I was like, you gotta be careful with that advice.
Just say something inoffensive but weird, and then I'll be like, oh yeah. But no, so just like, rarely, if it's probably not going to be like you meet someone and it's just like you're hired on the spot. Like it's not going to happen like that. What's much more common is meet as many people as you can, tell everyone you're interested in what boards or animation or whatever it is you specialize in at events like this. Maybe, reach out to people. You can find people on LinkedIn, ask them if they'll do a 30-minute Zoom or get coffee with you. Drew and I got coffee a few months ago. He networks. And you just, as many people as you can, like most of it won't go anywhere. Most people probably won't respond to your LinkedIn message, but maybe 1 out of 10 will, and you can do a Zoom or get a coffee with them. And then if you just do that enough, it might be 6 months from now, it might be a year from now. Like you might, because I've done it when hiring people, like I just email someone, it's like, hey, we talked like a year ago, and now we're hiring storyboard revisionists. And I remember you said something like, are you available? So like it might not happen instantly, but just cast as wide a net as you can. That's as much as you can control.
Yeah, I agree with Matt. It's a wide net, and it's a time game. I find even I was like, either I get hired in January or September, and then outside of that, it's a little dicey if there's like, I get random little things, but like, did we answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question, and kind of in relation to that hiring. Have you noticed much of a shift in the animation industry from hiring in-house people to freelance? And how does someone who is freelance in that case stand out to you? What makes you decide to hire that
This is a
new or old writer, or someone who hasn't quite made a name for themselves?
Yeah, in terms of freelance, typically, well, it depends. Every studio is different. It's also something to keep in mind. Like, you might hear, I'm talking about, I currently work at Titmouse, but, how we do things on like the shows I've worked on Titmouse aren't necessarily how other shows at Titmouse work. I work through New York, there's Titmouse LA, there's Titmouse Vancouver, and stuff changes all the time and every project's different. So take everything with a grain of salt. But in terms of hiring freelancers, yeah, typically we hire people as full-time staff people to work on the show, typically for at least 6 months or so, depending on the job. And then freelancers are really just brought in when there's like extra help that we might need. Are you talking about freelance that way, or like just not working in the office?
Kind of. I've been wondering if there has been a shift toward hiring more of those freelance.
I see.
artists Or
Yeah, I mean,
writers and-
not with us, at least in the projects that I've worked on. A big thing too, actually, that's something for you all to keep in mind. Maybe you guys know about it because it affects Georgia too, but also in New York, these like a lot of the entertainment industry stuff goes through tax credits in each state. Georgia has one, that's why there's a lot of studios and movies that film here. New York has one. We're incentivized to hire people who live in New York for these New York projects as full-time employees, like not freelancers, because then they're eligible for the tax credit. And I think it's similar in Georgia with the studios down here.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And yeah, did that answer your freelance? I don't think I got it.
I have a little bit of an answer now that I understand your question. Okay. The freelance thing, I find Titmouse is one of the few places that hires people full-time these days. I'm almost always permalance or just totally freelance with everybody. Like, the Titmouse saved my life during COVID because all the work had totally dried up and they had like healthcare and everything. It was amazing. I'd say 80% of my life is freelance. I'm working 2 or 3 jobs at once at the same time. I haven't noticed a shift with them just hiring more freelancers, but everyone's trying to go cheap these days, so that could be the case, is they don't have to hire. That's smaller productions. I don't know what it is down here. I haven't worked with a lot down here. Does that answer? Works?
Yes.
Right.
Another question about networking.
Yeah.
Aside from ASIFA-South, this chapter, do y'all know of any places that one could go, like any, I don't know, animation companies, film companies that hosts networking events or things like that we could attend, like in the Atlanta area?
So I'll be honest, we are both pretty new to Atlanta. I just moved down to Atlanta in October.
Gotcha.
So I do not know, but I do know from my connections, there's a hell of a lot of production work down here in TV and film. As you know, Marvel, Steve Harvey, all that stuff. There's mountains of stuff down here. So there must be something, but what I've done up in New York was there might be like production groups or meetups. I used to go to production meetups in New York, and that'd be like anything would be there, like directors, makeup artists, anything.
Where do you find those opportunities?
I think someone back here is gonna have an answer for you.
Head on down to Fayetteville, to the Truist Studio. There is a community where people that make the films live right beside the studio. They have restaurants and things along those lines. They might be a little bit more expensive, go hang out there. One suggestion, it's not a fail singer. This is down in Fayetteville. Truist, previously it was known as Pinewood Studios. It's where all the Marvel movies were filmed.
Okay.
Yeah, he's saying down in Fayetteville where they film all the Marvel stuff. Everyone lives down there and works around there. But also to your point,
Head to Ren Fair.
Right, gotcha. All right.
I will say also to your point, what I used to do was, any kind of production work, like even camera, like director meetups. I used to do a lot of meetups in New York. Like directors are always looking for artists normally. Sometimes they're animation, music video, anything that's just like film. You can move over to film versus just animation, or television meetup stuff, anything like that. I don't know specifically, but there must be a chunk of that down here.
Exactly.
You just have to do a little legwork or talk to people and find it, but it's here, I guarantee you. Or ask this guy, or Ginger might know stuff, because Ginger knows everything. Ginger knows everything.
Ginger knows everything.
Yeah, she knows everything.
Is that her,
Yeah, that's her outside.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, ask her for more that kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Similarly, not everyone's into this, but if you're into game development or associated things, the Georgia Game Developers Association has regular meetups, ggda.org. We have a Christmas party at the end of the year, usually about December, early December. And then Siege is a convention that takes place for industry people, that includes students. It's shifted a little bit, but it's either October or November. So keep an eye out.
And I'll say, I've also worked in games and apps, and that's really good too, because that's mostly all animation and backgrounds and everything, as you would imagine.
Also, they do DreamHack, which is an Atlanta as well, the GGDA. They're great people to outsource for indie game developers who always need help with awesome animation creators for their video games. And that's how I met a lot of people through that. Very good to network with those people as well. Those are local people here in Georgia right now that need animators.
So then my advice for anyone that wants to hustle, talk to those two men afterwards. It's right, it's here in the room.
Just a question for Matt. In specifics to production, let's say, for example, you have an animation portfolio, you have a storyboard portfolio, background design portfolio. It's easy to take a look at somebody's portfolio. If you want to work in production, a lot of people start as production assistants. What would a portfolio for something like that look like?
Yeah, no portfolio.
Exactly.
It'd just be a resume. Yeah, PA jobs, it's kind of like, it's an entry-level job. So it's kind of like, we're mostly looking for people, I mean, ideally who have some sort of background went to art school maybe, or some kind of media production. You know, clearly they're interested in animation. A lot of getting a PA job though is really just talking your way into it, because like, to be honest, it's an entry-level job. It's essentially taking notes in a lot of meetings. But the thing is, like, really good PAs stand out within like 3 months, because they typically are the ones who are immediately going way beyond just taking notes, and they're asking questions, they're meeting all the artists, they're meeting the directors, they're asking to sit in on extra meetings so they learn the whole pipeline. Like, those are the people who immediately are singled out as like, promote them to coordinator, they're moving along. And then there's other PAs who come in and take notes and never ask any questions, and you're like, well,
Yeah.
I guess you'll be a PA forever. But yeah, it's a lot about just,
It goes back to networking, right?
it goes back to network, yeah, totally. And in an interview, just if you seem really interested and passionate, like that's been typically how I've hired PAs. It's just if they seem like they really want to be there and love animation and know their stuff, and know animation history and what's going on in the industry and stuff like that. Yeah, but no, we wouldn't look at a portfolio for anything. And actually, sometimes it can be a little tricky, because a lot of times people go to art school for animation, want to work in the animation industry. Maybe they're applying for board revisionist or a prop designer, like entry-level art jobs, and maybe they're not getting them, or there just aren't any jobs. So then they're like, oh, but we're hiring 2 PAs right now. And sometimes, we've done that and it works out great. And the artist says, actually, I love production work. I don't miss drawing. It's really cool to know all the artists and to see the whole pipeline. And I really like just working with all the creative people and helping them. But then on the flip side, I've had PAs who, they're great for like 2 weeks, and then you can tell they wish they were drawing all day, and then they just blow it, and they're not good at production, and they don't want to do it. And I've had people like that who did that, and then we actually on another project hired her back as a prop designer, and she was much happier, and it worked out well. So yeah, sometimes like when we're hiring people, actually, it's kind of like, do you really want to do production? And sometimes if we're looking for people who really want to be on the production track, because we don't want to have to replace them.
How could you make something like that stand out in like a resume? Just knowing, like, say, production suite software would be one?
Yeah,
or?
I mean, that would be huge. I mean, like, for a PA job, the expectations are pretty low. We're like, because you learn on the job. Like,
Right.
The point of the job is like, that's where you learn everything. On your first job as a PA, you'll learn whatever. Every studio has their own weird software they use. You'll learn it, but I mean, it would definitely stand out if you have some sort of. I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen a PA resume that actually had like production tracking, so like Shot Creator or any program like that. If something like that was on there, you definitely stand out. Yeah.
We got time for one more question.
So following up from that, is it possible to get a PA job at somewhere like Titmouse remotely? Because I know you said you work remote, but is it possible to start remote?
Some people have. The tricky thing is, like I mentioned before, the whole like New York tax credit situation does make things tricky, and it's a really frustrating thing because like with COVID, like everyone still works from home now. A lot of people did move out of New York. I was in New York before, so there is like yes, we have had PAs start, but typically they still live in New York State, at least for our projects. I know some Titmouse LA projects, they're not bound by these like tax credit stuff. So I think some of them have hired production people, PAs on the East Coast. So it's possible. The only tricky thing, especially if you're working a project based in LA, is dealing with the time difference. Typically, they will ask you to work LA hours, which might be fine for like a month, and then it's not fine. But yeah, it's rare, but yeah, it's possible. But I will say, like, it's tricky to start a new job like a PA from home. It kind of helps to be in a studio and you'll absorb everything and meet everybody and learn a lot faster.
Can I ask you a question? This will work to everybody. Do you think you could, I've always thought you could get like a PA job in film or television, not being animation, and then you start getting some skills. How much do you think could you do entry level in like TV show and then switch to animation?
Yeah, that person would stand out. If you've been a PA on a live action show, it's production experience, not animation, but like, yeah.
And I realize that's not the ideal path, but you guys have a lot of production work going on down here, and a lot of television work. And so for something specifically like that, since the animation market is smaller down here, you could do that and then just be like, I'm gonna transfer over to animation once you got that'll get you through the initial, like I said, I started in commercials. I was doing JCPenney's commercials. I was not doing cool animation that you're seeing up here. I was making t-shirts dance in like, I was doing like car commercials, it was blast. I don't know, anyone else?
I think that's all we have time for.
Oh, that's all we got time for. We're gonna be hanging out. You can find us both on LinkedIn pretty easily. Talk to Drew, he knows us, whatever. Good luck on all your careers. Get ready for the roller coaster, but it's super great, it's super fun. Matt, last words of encouragement?
Thanks for coming out, everybody. Yeah.